Connect your world with the Galaxy S22 and Chromebook. So
That's okay. We're insured. Are you waiting for the grave? That's okay. Welcome, people. I'm just going to let some people come in the door first before I start my reading. That's the living. How you doing, Dee? Nice to see you, Dee. I'm going to do a bit of reading tonight. Some live reading. Getting away with it all messed up. Getting away with it all messed up. That's the living. I'll be starting reading in a few minutes, guys. I'm just letting some people get in the door first for a start. Sometimes people don't get 5-10 minutes in. Good morning, Mask. How you doing, man? That's the living. Aye, can I be a bit of James? I've seen them live. I've got their concert live. I recorded the whole concert on a live stream. It was quite good. Like, that's had a few thousand. That's probably had about 5,000 views, that one, actually. Well, I'm going to be reading a wee bit of the Druid stuff. I've been kind of focusing a lot on priests and churches and monks and saints. That's the living. Getting away with it. That's the living. Right, enough of that, guys. So I decided I was going to do a bit of reading myself. I was just going to sit myself and do a little bit of reading, but I thought, do you know what? Why not live stream my reading? Since I never done one of my epic live stream walks at the weekend, so I thought I'd maybe make up for it with a wee bit of book reading. And this is a book for like 1894 by James Bonwick. And a lot of people have been asking me about the Druids. And to be quite frank, people, there's not a lot. and you're going by a lot of stuff by Ninnius and the Romans, and it's very sketchy stuff, and it's hard to nail down where they came from, the original roots of the Druids, and what their true religion. Because you've got this now, you've got this modern Druidism, and they're kind of just making shit up, and it kind of messes up history in a way. Cool, I'll stick the headphones and chill out. Aye. I might shout and swear. Nah, I'm only kidding. Aye, chill out, man. Chill out. But like I said, I was going to read it myself, sit there and read it for maybe an hour or two. But I thought I'd share it on the live stream, and maybe I can listen back and find some clues. So, like I said, this is in the Library Ireland. You can find loads of good stuff about Ireland on this site. And this is Who Were the Druids by James Bonwick. Irish Druids and Old Irish Religions, 1894. So, who were the Druids? This question has agitated the minds of the learned for a long period, and various, as well as contradictory, have been the replies. Tradition preserves their memory as a pious and superior race, prominently associated with the British Isles and France, and a lesser degree with Belgium, Holland, Germany, and the lands of Scandinavia. Much romance is long attached to them. We hear their chants in the stone circles. We listen to the heaven-inspired utterances of the arch-druid as he stands on the capstone of a cromlech in the eye of the sun, surrounded by white-robed throng with the bowed worshippers afar. We see the golden sickle reverently cutting off the sacred mistletoe. We follow in imagination with solemn procession headed by the cross-bearer. We look under the old oak at the aged druid, instructing disciples in mystic lore, in verses never to be committed to writing. We gaze upon the assembly of kings and chieftains, before whom the wise men debate upon some points of legislation. Then again, we recognize the priests as patriots, resisting the invaders of their homes and loudly chanting the battle hymn. We are at the convocation of Brehons in their deliberations on law, and awestruck wait upon the observers of sun and stars, or of the signs of the times and investigation of terrestrial phenomena. We go with them to the judgment upon offenders of an unwritten code and witness the dread ordeal or the fiery human sacrifice. But our inquiry is, what has Irish tradition or literature to say to these interesting details concerning Druids? Were the Irish Druids like those of whom we read belonging to other lands? Did they spring up from among the Irish people, or were they strangers from another distant shore? Could they have formed a distinct community like the tribe of Levi, intermarrying among themselves only? Amidst much ignorance and even barbarism, can the Druids have been distinguished by learning and refinement attributed to them? The tribe of Levi, that's interesting, people, eh? Why? This is the first time I've read everything I'm saying right now. Is the very first time I've read. I've never read this book at all, and I was going to, like I said, I was going to start reading it tonight. A lot of the stuff I've read on this channel, in fact, I've read twice. And I've read once, and I thought, oh, this is really good. I need to read it on my channel. But this is the first time you're reading, and it's interesting they mention the tribe of Levi already, to the Druids, linking Levi and the Druids. Anyway, I'll quickly jump to the StreamYard just to see who's in the chat, give you a little shout out, and I'll jump back to the reading. So it's still Mask, still D. How you doing, guys? Good to see you. We've got 6 people in, no one's talking, but I hope you are interested in the old subject of the Druids. Let's get back to the reading anyway. With our conceptions of the ancient religions of Ireland, should we credit the Druids with the introduction of sun worship, serpent reverence, and adoration of idols? Were they, on the contrary, newcomers arriving subsequent to the establishment of these various forms of paganism, and merely known a little before the rise of Christianity in Erin. Right, so the next page. Welsh. So Welsh or British Druidism. Druidism has been of late years so persistently appropriated by the Welsh that English, Scotch, and Irish have seemed to have no part in the property. Even Stonehenge has been claimed by the Welsh on the very doubtful story of the Britons, Caesar's Teutonic Belgae being driven by the Romans to Wales. The true Welsh, the Silures or the Iberians, were in the land before the Romans appeared. Gaels from Ireland, Cymry from Scotland and England, Belgae from Germany, Bretons, Saxons, Norman, English, Irish, and Flemings go to make up the rest. We know nothing of Welsh prehistoric races. Even allowing cromlechs, circles, and pillar stones to be called druidical, there are few of these stone remains in Wales than in Scotland, Ireland, England, or France, as to other antiquities. Ireland is richer than Wales in all but Roman ruins. So there you go. So I think that this author's stating that Wales is claiming a little too much, I think, for the Druids, because maybe they're European, and they were spread all over the place, but the Welsh seem to, again, the Druids were here, the Druids, maybe Wales was the last place the Druids ended up. Who knows? Anglesey, I'm sure the Battle of Anglesey and that island in Wales, just off of Wales, in north of Wales, maybe that was the last stand there. It's hard upon Ireland that her Druids should have been so long neglected, and the honours of mystic wisdom become the sole possession of Wales. It is true, however, that the Irish have been less eager about their ancestral glory in that aspect, and have not put forward, as the Welsh have done, a neo-Druidism to revive the reputation of the ancient order. But Ireland had its Druids, and traditionally lore justifies that country in the acknowledgement of those magi or philosophers. The Welsh have a great advantage over the Irish in the reputed possession of a literature termed Druidical. They assumed to know who the Druids were and what they taught by certain writings conveying the secret information. The Irish do not even pretend to any such knowledge of their Druids. The Welsh, therefore, look down with pity upon their insular neighbours and plume themselves on being the sole successors of a people who were under true Druidical teaching and whose transmitted records reveal those mysteries. Does that sound familiar, anybody? I'm not saying any names here, but this sounds familiar. And this is 1894. This book. The revival of the ancient faith, an organisation called Druids of Pontypridd, having members in other parts of Wales but claiming a far larger number of adherents in America, has given more prominence to Druidical lore. The fact of the late simple-minded but learned archdruid Mifir Morganwg, a poet and scholar, after 30 years preaching of Christianity, publicly proclaiming the creed of his heathen forefathers, has naturally startled many thoughtful minds. The writer can affirm from personal knowledge of Mifir that he was no pretender, but an absolute believer in the tenets he taught. It is not therefore surprising that students of anthropology should inquire into this revival. Such teachings is quite different from the Neo-Druidism which arose a few years ago, and whose imaginative interpretations of writings in Welsh under the names of Taliesin, etc., were endorsed by several distinguished ministers of the Christian religion. Neo-Druidism was brought forward at Eisteddfods, and works were written to show that Welsh Druidism was simply the truth as recorded in the biblical account of the Hebrew patriarchs. Is this why I'm getting so many links with the Hebrews, the Celts, the Druids, the culture parallels? This is interesting, guys. I didn't expect this to sort of pop up in my reading. So much of the sort of biblical stuff. Like we've already heard the tribe of Levi, and now we're hearing the Hebrew patriarchs. This is interesting stuff, and it's interesting how the author seems to have this sort of thing against Wales right now, and what he's maybe he's got a point to prove at the end of what he's saying. But right, I'll have a wee look at StreamYard again, guys. We're not in any hurry, are we? Is in a hurry to get to your beds? Right. So Nomash says knows someone called Erin. A lot of Arthurian legends are tied to Wales, but a lot of Arthurian legends tied to Scotland as well. But we didn't seem to bang on about it as much. There's probably more stuff tied in Scotland than Wales. But like I said, the Welsh seem to bang on quite loudly about it. Happiness would be able to play the damn thing. His guitar, he's talking about his guitar. How you doing, Epic? Nice to see you. Carthage was both Phoenician and Gaul, which is Hebrew and Celtic, he claims. I'll put your... But like I said, this book's 1894, so we're going back a wee bit. Right, so I think we finished at the Hebrew patriarchs there. The Pontypridd Archdruid held quite another doctrine. He embraced within the fold not only Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but the promulgators of Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the ancient systems of so-called idolatry. He recognized his principles in them all, as they simply represented the forces of nature under the guise of personalities. Light of Britannia. The mantle of the octogenarian leader has fallen upon Mr. Owen Morgan, better known as Morian, long and able and voluminous writer for the press. His version of Welsh Druidism can be studied in the recently published Light of Britannia. He assumes for his Druids the priority of learning. From the mountains of Britain proceeded the light which produced the wisdom of Egypt, Babylon, Persia, India, Phoenicia, Judea, and Greece. They who deem this too large a draft upon faith for acceptance will assuredly discover in that unique work a mass of curious facts bearing upon ancient science, and be constrained to admit that the Light of Britannia is not the product of unreasoning Welsh enthusiasm, but is among the most candidly expressed books ever printed. It was Dr. Lanigan who asserted the Christian missionaries early opened schools in opposition to Druids. It was the opinion of Arthur Clive that much Druidism blended with the Christian learning of the 7th and subsequent centuries. The same might be affirmed of Welsh Druidism, alluding to an astronomical MS of the 14th century, Clive says. I believe that, or rather the knowledge which it contains, is a druidic survival, a spark transmitted through the Dark Ages, Gomm tells us. That Druidism continued to exist long after it was officially dead can be proved. Dr. Moran, Bishop of Ossory and his Irish saints, associated the Welsh Saint David with an Irish Druid. Saint David was the son of an Irish Christian lady. He came to Menevia on the Welsh promontory, made a fire on the shore, and its smoke filled the land. The bishop then goes on to say, the owner of the district was an Irishman named Baya, a pagan and a druid. He was one of those successful rovers who years before had carved out territories for themselves on the Welsh coast and continued to hold them by the sword. He was filled with horror when he saw the smoke that arose from St. David's fire and cried out to those who were with him, the enemy that has lit the fire shall possess this territory as far as the smoke has spread. They resolved to slay the intruders, but their attempt was frustrated by a miracle. Seeing this, Baya made a grant of the desired site and of the surrounding country to St. David, whose monastery quickly arose. Welsh patriotic zeal would receive a shock from Professor O'Corry's statement. It appears then it was from Erin that the Isle of Mona, Anglesey, received its earliest colony, and that colony was of a Druidical people. This view has been supported by other testimony. The Welsh Cerrig Idris, Cadar Idris, has been identified with Irish Carrick, Carrick Broda of Dundalk, like Carrig Braden of Mona, was renowned for astronomical observations. Owen Morgan, in the Light of Britannia, has brought forward authorities to support his theory that the Welsh, at any rate, could claim for ancestors the Druids of classical writers, but Leflock declares the language of the so-called Welsh Druids of the early Christian centuries is modern, and that even Sharon Turner, for the mythological poems, dare not assign them to the 6th century nor attribute them to Taliesin. He considers the mystery of the bards of Britain consists of a number of Christian sentences, interpreted according to the arbitrary system of modern mysticism, and concludes, such are the narrow bases of the vast preconceived system of our days as to the true religion of the Gauls. See, there's not that much known about them. And a lot of stuff that you do hear about the Druids is kind of created through neo-paganism, like people picking up the pieces and adding little bits on, and it's trying to find the true religion. And that's what this channel is all about, guys. Try to find the truth. How you doing, Ulrich McGee? I'm reading a wee bit Irish stuff here, mate. I'm in the Irish library. Good to see you. Mixing it up. Right. Where do true religion of the Gauls? But Rhys in Celtic Britain asserts that the Godelic Celts appear to have accepted Druidism, but there's no evidence that it ever was the religion of any Brythonic people. Again, the northwest of Wales and a great portion of the south of it had always been in the possession of a Godelic people whose nearest kinsmen were the Godels of Ireland. The Brythonic Celts, who were the polytheists of the Aryan type, the non-Celtic natives, were under the sway of Druidism, and the Godoilic Celts, devotees of a religion which combined polytheism with Druidism. He says the word Cymry merely meant fellow countrymen, though, as he adds, the Cymry people developed a literature of their own, differing from that of the other Brythonic communities. He makes Carlisle the centre of their influence before coming down into Wales. So Carlisle was the Cymry, according to this author. I'm not saying this is, like I say, this. I'm just reading this book, and we'll take what we can for it. But he's saying that the Cymry people, the capital was in Carlisle, which is interesting. The assumptions of Welsh advocates may not be very satisfactory to scholars, and all we know of Irish Druids furnishes little evidence for romantic conclusions. But why should tradition hold so tenaciously to the theory, making all allowance for extravagance of views and their variety? It is not easy to explain these early and particular accounts. Although Welsh Druidism is represented by Welsh writers as being so different from the Gaulish, as pictured by French authors or the Irish of Irish scholars, a few words may be allowed from the publication of the enthusiastic Maurian of Wales. It is evident, says he, that the Druid believed in the eternity of matter in an atomic condition, and also in the eternity of water, and that the passive, that is, the feminine principle of the divine nature pervaded both from eternity. He imagined a period before creation began, when darkness and silence pervaded illimitable space. The Son is the Son of the Creator, who is referred to by the Druids as the higher sun of the circle of infinitudes above the zodiacal sun. So who's that? The Son is the Son of the Creator, who is referred to by the Druids as the higher sun of the circle of infinitudes above the zodiacal sun. So are they talking about two suns here? We've got the normal sun and I'm not sure what he's saying there. Wherever the solar rites relating to the ancient worship had been performed, those places were still regarded by the masses as sacred. So maybe it's these stone circles is the zodiacal sun, and then you've got the sky, the sun in the sky. So maybe that's what they're talking about. Right. Where did I go? What happened there? Sorry, guys, The annum of Morian is Hades or Erebus, and that of Northern ideas is Cold of the Archdruid, he says. The divine word incarnate, such was our druidic high priest, especially when standing on the Logan stone. And see this word, Logan? I found it connected with Merlin, in fact. This name, Logan, connects with Merlin because Merlin was known as Myrddin, and this Myrddin character was known as Lailoken. And this Loken is the Logan part. So when I was doing the borders, I started noticing there was hills, Logan Burn, the Logan. I was like, who's Logan? And funnily enough, the name Logan actually connects to Merlin again, which is funny. Anyway, back to this. Especially when standing on the Logan stone. The Holy Grail was the cauldron of Ceridwen or Venus. Ceridwen. The cauldron of Ceridwen or Venus. The Druids' ecclesiastical year commenced at midnight, March the 20th to the 21st. God was regarded through the symbol of three letters or rods representing the light or descent of rays, the true logos. So that's the symbol there. And I think it's called, in Welsh, I think they call it Awen. Awen. It's a bit like amen, but with the M upside down. Awen. Awen. But I'm sure that's what they call it. So, representing the light or descent of rays, the true logos. Who, the divine Son, was the Meno incarnate. The grave is the matrix of Ked, who bears the same relation to Venus as the Creator does to Apollo the sun. The 12 battles of Arthur, or the sun, relate to the signs of the zodiac. So I kind of said that before in a video, that this whole Arthur story, and same with the Bible stories, could all be astronomical, passed down for the Druids through Christianity, through myths and legends, including Arthur. So even the people that weren't into the religion would probably know some stuff through myths and stories that's passed through them through their childhoods and stuff. Morian observes two sects in Druidism, the party of the Linga and that of the Logos. His Druidism is simply solar worship, or, in other sense, pure phallicism. According to him, the Christian religion is scientifically arranged on the most ancient framework of British Druidism. You hear that, people? The Christian religion is scientifically arranged on the most ancient framework of British Druidism. So if you wonder why I'm on my travels, I'm looking at biblical stuff. I'm looking at pagan stuff because they're kind of interlinked. There's parallels. I mean, I've got no horse in Entkin. I've not got any horse in the race, should we say? But this is why I look at both sides. A perusal of Moraine's Light of Britannia will give the reader an explicit account of the mystery of Welsh Druidism, but fail to prove its identity with Irish Druidism. Although the connection of Ireland with Wales was most intimate before the Danish invasion, traditional Irish saints, having converted to Christianity, their wilder neighbours of North and South Wales, as they did of those in Cornwall and other places. The Druid, according to Moraine and his distinguished master, the Archdruid Mifer Morgan, was a more picturesque individual than the person figured by Irish writers, and he is strictly associated with the so-called Druidical circles, cromlechs, etc. Stonehenge and Avebury, not less than Mona and Pontypridd, are claimed as the scenes of their performances. All that tradition has represented them, or poets have imagined them. The Druids were in the estimation of modern Welsh authorities. Theirs were the hands free from violence. Theirs were the mouths free from calumny. Theirs the learning without pride, and theirs the love without venery. They were more than what Madame Blavatsky said. Oh, we've heard her before, eh? Madame Blavatsky, is she, the mother of New Age occultism or something like that. Somebody correct me in the chat, but I think she's known as the mother of like New Age mysticism and all that stuff. Anyway, they were more than what Madame Blavatsky said, only the heirs of the Cyclopean lore left to them by generations of mighty hunters and magicians. They were, as Diodorus declared, philosophers and divines, who they, Gauls, call Saranidae, and are held in great veneration. Murpher left it on record that the Druids of Britain were Brahmins, as beyond the least shadow of a doubt. Brahms, or Brahmins, as Brahmins. That word there, Brahmins, reminds me of Brehon, like the Brehon law, the old Irish, Celtic, Gaelic laws that were replaced with the English crown. We had a system called the Brehon law, and it worked on a system of compensation rather than imprisonment and stuff like that. It's totally different. Anyway, the Druids' dress. Let's see. Is that the next? Right, what did they wear? I'll have a wee look at the chat. I'll just go through each page and have a wee look at the chat at the same time. So we've got Sins Camilla. Nice to see you, man. When can we expect your book on the subject? I'll buy a copy and seek you out to sign it. Do you know what? My missus has been saying that for ages, that Jed, you need to write a book. Even a fiction one. You know what I mean? So Epic says the Brahmins are the ruling class in Buddhism. The Brehon laws. Yep. And the Brahmins. So Ulit McGee says, have you read Mythology, Cuchulainn, for example? The Christian brothers taught it to me. Cuchulainn's a brilliant story. I love the Cuchulainn stories. Especially how he was born, and he was born with his mother racing a horse, and how he died. How Cuchulainn died was cool. On the stone, Cuchulainn, he tied himself to a standing stone, and nobody would go near him until they seen the Morgan land on his shoulder, and they knew he was dead when the crow landed on his shoulder. So after the crow landed on his shoulder, the enemy approached Cuchulainn's body on the standing stone, and even when they approached the stone, Cuchulainn's dead body, his arm came down and chopped one of the guy's arms off. Apparently, Like, so even when he was dead, he was still like killing people. But these stories are brilliant, Ulick, and I think they should be more widely known. These old Irish stories, and like I said, I'm sure you can see where a lot of biblical stuff was robbed, again, for the old Irish mythologies, old British mythologies. Right. A Druid's dress. So we're going to look at what they wore. Much has been written about Druids' dress, their ornaments, and the mysteries of their craft. As the glass boat, the cup, the cross, etc. Archdruid Miffer at Pontypridd, not Dr. Price, explained to the present writer his processional cross with movable arms, his wonderful egg bequeathed from past ages, his pennaethnin, writing rods or staff books, his rosary used by ancient priests, not less than by modern Mahometans and Christians. What was that? Mahometans. I've never heard of them. Never heard of that word or read that word in my life. His glass beads, his torque for the neck, his breastplate of judgment, his crest adornments, his staff of office, etc. The staff of Litus was of magical import. Wands of tamarisk were in the hands of Magian priests. The top of such augur rods were slightly hooked. One found in Etruria had budded in the hand. The barsum or bundle of twigs is held by Parisy priests. Strabo noted twigs in hand at prayer. The Thyrsus had several knots. Prometheus hid the fire from heaven in his rod. There's Prometheus coming into the act now. Glass was known in Egypt some 3,000 or 4,000 years before Christ. Amber beads, Hesiod's tears of the sisters of Phoebus, were in use by Phoenicians, brought probably from the Baltic. Torques have been found in many lands, as Bacon remarked. Religion delights in such shadows and disguises. Nash, in his remarks upon the writings of Taliesin, writes, the only place in Britain which there is any distinct evidence from the Roman authorities of the existence of Druids should be the Isles of Anglesey, the seat of the Irish population before the migration from Scotland of the Cambrian tribes, the ancestors of the modern Welsh. He thus fixes the Irish Druids in Wales. While history and philology are tracing the great migration of Cambrians into North Wales from Scotland, where their language prevailed before the Gaelic, why is North Britain so little affected with the mysticism associated with the Welsh Druidism? A natural reply would be that this peculiar manifestation came into Wales subsequent to the Cambrian migration from Western Highlands through Cumberland to the southern side of Mersey, and did not originate with the Cambrian Druids. It must not be forgotten that the two distinct races inhabit Wales, the one Celtic of the north and the other Iberian, dark and broad-shouldered of the south. Some Iberians, as of Spain and North Africa, retained the more ancient language. Others adopted another tongue. Many of the so-called Arabs in Sudan are of the Iberian parentage. No one can read Morian's most interesting and suggestive Light of Britannia without being struck with the remarkable parallel drawn between the most ancient creeds of Asia and the assumed Druidism of Wales. The supposition of that industrious author is that the British Druids were the originators of the theologies or mythologies of the old world. Interesting. Ireland, in his calculation, is quite left out in the cold. Yet, it is in Ireland, not in Wales, that Oriental religions had their strongest influence. That country, and not Wales, would appear to have been visited by Mediterranean traders, though tradition, not well substantiated, makes Cornwall one of their calling places. Irish Druidism. Turning to Irish Druidism, we may discern a meaning when reading between the lines in Irish MSS, but the mystery is either not understood by the narrators or is purposely beclouded so as to be unintelligible to the vulgar and remove the writers, more or less ecclesiastics, from the censure of superiors in the church. Elsewhere in the chapter upon God's history, as seen in the lives of Irish heroes and founders of tribes, is made the medium of the communication in some way of esoteric intelligence. If the Druids of Erin were in any degree associated with that assumed mythology, they come much nearer the wisdom of British Druids than is generally supposed, and were not the common jugglers and fortune-tellers of Irish authorities. As the popular Professor O'Curry may be safely taken as one leading exponent of Irish opinion upon Irish Druids, a quotation from his able lectures will indicate this view. Our tradition, says he, of the Scottish and the Irish Druids are evidently derived from a time when Christianity had long been established. These insular Druids are represented as being little better than conjurers, and their dignity is as much diminished as the power of the king is exaggerated. He is hedged with a royal majesty which never existed in fact. He is a pharaoh or Belshazzar with a troop of wizards at his command. His druids are sorcerers and rain doctors who pretend to call down the storms and the snow and frighten the people with the fluttering wisp and other childish charms. They divined by the observation of sneezing and omens, by their dreams and after holding a bull feast, or chewing raw horse flesh in front of their idols, by the croaking of their ravens and chirping of tame wrens, or by the ceremony of licking the hot edge of bronze taken out of the rowan tree faggot. They are like the red Indian medicine men, or the Ancocks of Eskimo dressed up in bull's hide coats and bird caps with waving wings. The chief or archdruid of Tara is shown to us as a leaping juggler with ear clasps of gold and speckled cloak. He tosses swords and balls into the air, and like the buzzing of bees on a beautiful day, is the motion of each passing the other. This, perhaps, the ordinary and most prosaic account of the Irish Druid, is to be gathered from the ecclesiastical annals of St. Patrick. The monkish writers had assuredly no high opinion of the Druid of tradition, and doubtless no respect for the memory of Taliesin or other members of the craft. Nevertheless, we should bear in mind that the same authorities took for granted all the stories floating about concerning transformations of men and women into beasts and birds, and all relations about gods of old. O'Byrne Crow has some doubt about Druid stories and primitive missionaries. He finds in the hymn of St. Patrick the word Druid but once mentioned, and that it is absent, alike in Brocken's Life of St. Bridget and in Coleman's hymn. Though Irish Druidism, says he, never attained to anything like organization, still it forms and practices so far as they attain to order, were in the main the same as those of Gaul. Those Christian writers admitted that the Druids had a literature. The author of the Lecan declared that St. Patrick at one time burnt 180 books of the Druids. So this idea that the Druids only had verbal learning or passed their stories through vocal stories or verbal stories, and it looks here that they possibly had books. Such an example, he said, set the converted Christians to work in all parts until, in the end, all the remains of the Druidic superstition were utterly destroyed. Other writers mention the same fact as to this burning of heathen MSS. Certainly no such documents had, even in copies, any existence in historic times, though no one can deny the possibility of such a literature. The Welsh, however, claim the possession of Druidic works, but the earliest of these date from Christian times, bearing in their composition biblical references, and, by experts, are supposed to be of any period between the 7th and 12th centuries. Villemark dates the earliest Breton bards from the 6th century. Other writers have them later. At the same time, it must be allowed that early Irish MSS, which all date since Christianity came to the island, contain references of a mystical character, which might be styled druidical. Most of the Irish literature professed treating of historical events has been regarded as having covert allusions to ancient superstitions, the individuals mentioned being of a mythical character. A considerable number of such references are associated with the Druids, whatever these were thought then to be. Miracles were abundant, as they have been in all periods of Irish history. The deity, the angels, the spirits of the air or elsewhere are ever at hand to work a marvel, though often for little apparent occasion, as the performances of saints are precisely similar to those attributed to Druids. One is naturally puzzled to know where one party quits the field and the other one comes on. So this is what I've been doing, guys. Like my last video that we were looking at, like Saint Moloch or Saint John the Baptist, John the Baptist. What came first? What came first, the saint or the god? The Druids, again, like they're so blurred together that you're trying to separate them. And that's as the performances of saints are precisely similar to those attributed to Druids. One is naturally puzzled to know where one party quits the field and the other comes on. So that's like the saying, it's puzzled to know where one begins and the other one ends. You know what I mean? A large number of these references belong to the Fenian days, when the Tuatha Druids practiced their reportedly unholy rites. Thus, Tige was the father of the wife of the celebrated Fenian leader, Fionn Macumel, or Fionn Buoscin, slain ath Brea on the Boyne. But Matha Macumor was a Druid who confronted St. Patrick. St. Bridget was the daughter of the Druid Dubnacht. The Druid Cacher foretold that the race he loved would one day migrate to the west. In Ninine's prayer it is written, "We put trust in St. Patrick, chief apostle of Ireland. He fought against hard-hearted Druids." As told by T. O'Flanagan, 1808, King Thady, father of Ossian, was a Druid. Erin was called the Isle of Learned Druids. Plutarch relates that Claudius, exploring, found on an island near Britain an order of magi, reputed holy by the people. Tradition says that Partholon from Greece brought 3 Druids with him. These were Theos, Elios, and Focmark. That is, observe O'Curry, if we seek the etymological meaning of the words intelligence, knowledge, and inquiry. The Numidians. The Numidians reached Ireland from Scythia, but were accompanied by Druids, who, however, were confounded by the Fomorian Druids. At first the Numidians were victorious, but the Fomorian leader brought forward his most powerful spells and forced the others into exile. It's funny because when I look at those battles with the Fomorians in old Irish history, it's funny how the Fomorians were described as being ugly and animal-like. They had fish heads and stuff like that, but it was maybe they wore these animal-like. It makes sense if they were Druids. And it's strange to think different Druids, these Druids battling each other. These druid battles, which is pretty cool. Different druids for different parts of the world battling each other. But the Fomorian leader brought forward his most powerful spells and forced the others into exile. Beothak, Nemed's grandson, retired with his clan to Northern Europe or Scandinavia, where they made themselves perfect in all the arts of divination, Druidism, and philosophy, and returned after some generations to Erin under the name of the Tuatha de Danann. The last were most formidable Druids, though overcome in their turn by the Druids of invading Milesians from Spain. And it's crazy to think that we always think, guys, that like the end of the Druids were because of the Romans or because of Christianity or stuff. It never really comes to mind that the Druids were fighting each other as well. That's just blowing my mind in a way to think there's different branches of Druidism fighting each other. You can just imagine these wizards. And even Druids from Spain as well. So we've got these big European Druidic battles like Lord of the Rings. They're all casting their spells at each other. The Fomorians, the Scottish ones, we've got the Welsh ones. So no mask. I'm ducking out of chat as up early in the morning, but we'll be listening as I drift up. People usually use my voice as a sleeping tool. I've heard that a few times, that people like to fall asleep to my voice. But like I said, guys, there's very little known about Druids, and it's just good to find some literature that's trying to find the bullshit about Druidism and try and find some of the true stuff about Druidism, because there's just so much intertwined and so much stuff that people make up as well and add on. It's like Chinese whispers, because Druids battled naked. Right, the Numidians, we'll get back to the Numidians. Overcome in their turn by... So the last were formidable Druids, though overcome in their turn by the Druids invading Milesians from Spain. So this is kind of in the Irish histories, that the Milesians came. So they were Druid hills at Uisneath. So we were seeing this word before, this Us. Westmeath and Clogger of Tyrone. The Druath were wise men from the east. Tubdak Mac U Lager, Archdruid of King Mac Niall, became a Christian convert. The Battle of Moirath, asserted by monkish writers to have taken place in 637, decided the fate of the Druids. And yet the Four Masters relate that as early as 927 BC, there existed Mar Olavan, the city of the learned, or Druidic seminary. So 927 BC, the Four Masters relate that as early as 927 BC, there existed Mar Olavan, the city of the learned, or Druidic seminary. I've never heard of that. I'll need, like I said, once I stop recording this, I'll go back and research some of these places that have come up. Backrack, a Leinster Druid, told Concobar, king of Ulster, something which is thus narrated. There was a great convulsion. What is this? Said Concobar to his Druid. What great evil is it that is perpetrated this day? It is true indeed, said the Druid. Christ, the Son of God, is crucified this day by the Jews. It was in the same night he was born that you were born, that is, in the 8th of the calends of January, though the year was not the same. It was then that Concobar believed, and he was one of the two men that believed in God and Erin before the coming of the faith. So Backrack, a Leinster Druid, told Concobar, king of Ulster. So they're talking about Christianity before Christianity was a thing. They're talking about on this day. That perpetrated this day. What great evil was perpetrated this day? The 8th of the calends of January. So that's no December the 25th. That's January. Like I said, I need to come back, guys, and research some of this stuff as well. Among the names of the Druids we have in Cormac's glossary, Serb, daughter of Scath, a Druid of the Connaught men, Munu, son of Tolchan, the Druid, and Druin, a Druid prophesizing bird. Dio Murram belonged to Craigavany Hill. Abe or Ob to Londonderry, we read that Trostderry, Tages, Cadadius, Dader, Dill, Mogroth, Dub Comar, Firkissus, Ida, Ono, Fathan, Lomderg, the Bloody Hand, and Bakrak or Lagincus. Lagincus Berkirius, Archdruid to King Niall. So look at that. Lomderg, the Bloody Hand. And I think that's where the Red Hand of Ulster. When you see in Ireland the Red Hand of Ulster, I'm sure the story comes from the Bloody Hand. I might be wrong there. Right, Druidices. It's even weird saying that word because I've never heard of the female Druidices. Druidices were not necessarily wives of Druids, but female possessed of druidical powers, being often young and fair. So this is female Druids. Some names of Druidices have been preserved as Gael Chossack or Cossa, white-legged of Innissovan, Donegal, where her grave is still pointed out to visitors. There was Milucrad, Hag of the Waters, reported to be still living, who turned King Fionn into an old man by water from Lake Slab Gillen. Ethne and Bandroyle were famous sorcerers. Tradition talks of women Isles of Ireland, as of Scotland, where Druidices at certain festivals lived apart from their husbands, as did afterwards Culdee wives at church orders. So there's the Culdee people being mentioned. The Culdee. And I kind of link the Culdee with the Druids as well. On St. Michael, on Senna Isles of Brittany and elsewhere, such religious ladies were known. Scotch witches and the reputed powers of transformation were successors of Druidices. Several ancient nunneries are conjectured to have been Druidices' retreats or has been established as such hallowed sites. So this is where nuns come from. At Kildare, the retreat of St. Bridget and her nuns having charge of the sacred fire, there used to be before her time a community of Irish Druidices, virgins, who were called from their office Ingu, Andaga, daughters of fire. The well-known Tuam, with its 90 nuns, may be an instance, since the word Celtic means either nun or Druidess. On this, Hackett remarks, the probability is that they were pagan Druidices. I can't even say that word there. Druideses. It doesn't feel like it rolls off the tongue properly. Druidess, a nun or Druidess. So it's Druidesses. I think that's the word there, Druidesses. So I'm not going to get it wrong now. I've said that about 20 times, Druidesses. Right. Dr. O'Connor notes the Cluan Fert, or sacred retreat for Druidical nuns. It was decidedly dangerous for anyone to meddle with those ladies, since they could raise storms, cause diseases, or strike with death. But how came Pliny to say that the wives of Druids attended certain religious rites naked, but with blackened bodies? Enchantresses possessed of evil spirits, like in ancient Babylon or as in China now, were very unpleasant company and a source of unhappiness in a family. You've got to remember, guys, this was done in this was 1890, so they're comparing China, or as in China now, were very unpleasant. Enchantresses possessed of evil spirits, like as in ancient Babylon, or as in China now. Oh, that's quite funny. Unpleasant company and a source of unhappiness in a family. The Reverend J.F. Sherman declared that Lochra and Luc Damoal were the heads of the Druids College, prophesying the coming of the Talsind, St. Patrick, or Talkind, that the first was lifted up and dashed against a stone by the saint, the other was burnt in the ordeal of fire at Tara, that the Druid Mots was he who upset the Saint Chalice, and that Ida and Anna were two converted Druids. Hmm. So we've got the Synod of Drumkeet. Hopefully we don't have to say Druidesses, Druidesses. Oh my God! Why did I have to do this live? Right. Anyway, the Synod of Drumkeet in 590 laid restrictions on Druids, but the Druids were officially abolished after the decisive battle of Moirath, 637. The bilingual inscription of Killeen Cormac, 4 IV Vir Drivides, or 4 true Druids, was said to refer to Dubtak MacNuggle as one of the 4, he having been baptized by Patrick. Dr. Ritchie may be right when he says in his History of the Irish People, attempts have been made to describe the civilization of the Irish in pre-Christian periods by the use of the numerous heroic tales and romances which still survive to us, but the Celtic epic is not more historically credible or useful than the Hellenic, the Tyne Bow, than the Iliad. It is probable that the readers of the foregoing tales, or those hereafter to be produced, may be of the same opinion. Not even the prophecy of St. Patrick's advent can be exempted, though the Fiach hymn runs, "For thus had their prophets foretold then the coming of a new time of peace would endure after Tara. Lay desert and silent, the Druids of Laery had told of this coming, had told of the kingdom." Druidical adornment. Ireland had a supply of the so-called Druidical appendages and adornments. There have been found golden torques, gorgets, armilli, and rods of various sorts and sizes. Some were twisted. They were thin laminae of gold with rounded plates at the ends. Others had penannular and bulbous terminations. Twisted wire served for lumber or girdle torques. A twisted one of gold picked up at Ballycastle weighed 22 ounce. Gorgets are seen only in Ireland and Cornwall. The Dying Gladiator in Rome had a twisted torque about his neck. The gold mines of Wicklow doubtless furnished the precious metal, as noted in Seneca's More. Pliny refers to the golden torques of Druids. One from Tara was 5 foot 7 inches long. So, guys, a torque was a thing that went round the neck. It was like a ring. It was like a ring with 2 balls. So you could actually get you could bend it enough to get your neck into it, but it would sort of lock in. So these torques would come round, and they found quite a lot of them in Scotland as well, actually. I think they found quite a few Turks in Scotland after this book. And I think they maybe found them in the 1930s or 40s. The thin chased gold with concave hemispherical ornaments. Oh, right. So one from Tara was 5 feet 7 long, weighing 27 ounces. A Todd found 12 feet in Limerick Bog was thin chased gold with concave hemispherical ornaments. The Aidan Moran, a breastplate, would contract on the neck if the judges gave a false judgment. The crescent ornament was the Irish Cade Reare, or sacred ship, answering to Talison's Quigger Gwydron, or glass boat. An armilla of 15 ounces was recovered in Galway. The glass beads, cylindrical in shape, found at Dunworley Bay, Cork, had said Lord Londesborough, quite a Coptic character. The Druid glass in Glenai na Droghad in Welsh, Glen na Druid in Irish. The Dublin Museum Irish Academy collection contains over 300 gold specimens. Many precious articles have been melted down for their gold. The treasure trove regulations have only existed since 1861. Lunettes are common. The Druids' tiaras were semi-oval and thin plates, highly embossed. The golden breastpins, Diolch Oir, are rare. Some armorly are solid, others hollow. Fibulae, bear cups. Torques are often spiral. Bullae are amulets of lead covered with thin gold. Circular gold plates are very thin and rude. Pastoral staffs, like pagan ones, have serpents twisted round them, as seen on Cashel pastoral staff. And Cashel was another cool place in Ireland. The Cashel Castle, and quite a cool place. You need to check that place out in Ireland, Cashel. Professor O'Curry says some of our gold glossarists explain the name Druid by doctus, learning, and Philly, a poet, as a lover of learning. But Cormac McCullinan, in his glossary, derives the word Philly from fee, venom, and lee, brightness, meaning that the poet's satire was venomous and his praise bright or beautiful. The Druid in his simple character does not appear to have been ambulatory, but stationary. He is not entitled to any privileges or immunities such as the poets and brehons or judges enjoyed. He considers the Druids' wands was of yew, and that they made use of Ogham writing, or Om writing. He names Tuath Druids as Brian, Tukar, Tukarba, Borb, Maca, and Morrigan, Kesarn, Gnakak, and Ignac-Thac, amongst Firbolgs, Uar, Aether, and Amergin as Milesians. Sencus More. For an illustration of Irish Druidism, reference may be made to the translation by Hancock and O'Mahony of the Sencus More. Some of the ideas developed in that Christian work were supposed traditional notions of earlier and Druidical times. Thus we learn that there were 8 winds, the colours of which were white and purple, pale grey, green, yellow, red, black, and grey, speckled and dark, the dark brown and the pale. From the east blows the purple wind, from the south the white, from the north the black, from the west the pale, the red and the yellow are between the white wind and the purple, etc. The thickness of the earth is measured by the space from the earth to the firmament. The 7 divisions from the firmament to the earth are Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, Sol, Luna, and Venus. From the moon to the sun is 244 miles, but from the firmament to the earth is 3,024 miles. As the shell is about the egg, so is the firmament around the earth. The firmament is a mighty sheet of crystal. The 12 constellations represent the year, as the sun runs through one each month. So, guys, if there's any flat earthers out there, they'll be loving this. They'll be trying to find what this literature comes from. The 7 divisions from the firmament. What was this? So, the Syncus More people, if you're a flat earther out there and you want to learn more about your wee system you've got there, I think they had something similar. That's crazy, actually. From the moon to the sun is to this is definitely flat earth stuff. This is probably where flat earth theorists got a lot of their stuff from. The firmament, the close suns and moons. The 12 constellations represent the year as the sun runs through one each month. Aye, flatties are going to love this. Oh, God. We are also informed that the Brig Ambu was a female author of wisdom and prudence among the men of Erin. After her came Conla Cainbreacht, chief doctor of Connacht. He excelled the men of Erin in wisdom, for he was filled with the grace of the Holy Ghost. He used to contend with the Druids, who said that it was they that made heaven and the earth and the sea and the sun and the moon. This Syncus More further stated that when the judges deviated from the truth of nature, there appeared blotches upon their cheeks. That's interesting. When the judges deviated from the truth of nature, there appeared blotches upon their cheeks. It's almost like embarrassment. It is not surprising that Dr. Ritchie, in his short history of the Irish people, should write, as to what Druidism was, either in speculation or practice, we have very little information. As far as we can conjecture, the religion must have consisted of tribal divinities and local rites. As to the Druids themselves, we have no distinct information. He is not astonished that authors from the reaction are now found to deny the existence of Druids altogether. He admits that at the reputed time of St. Patrick, the Druids seem to be nothing more than the local priests or magicians attached to the several tribal chiefs, perhaps not better than the medicine men of North American Indians. As that period was prior to the earliest assumed for the Welsh talisman, one is at a loss to account for the great difference between the two peoples, then so closely associated in intercourse. The opinion of the able O'Brien Crow is thus expressed. After the introduction of our Irish irregular system of Druidism, we must have been about the 2nd century of the Christian era. The Phyllis bards had to fall into something like the position of the British bards. But let us examine our older compositions, pieces which have about them intrinsic marks of authenticity, and we shall be astonished to see what a delicate figure the Druid makes in them. On the supposition that the Druidism has not time for development before the arrival of the saint, he accounts for the easy conversion of Ireland to Christianity. It is singular that Taliesin should mention that the sun is being sent in a coracle from Cardigan Bay to Arkle or Arklow in Ireland. This leads to Morian to note the solar drama performed in the neighbourhood of Borth, Wales, and Arklow, Ireland. Arthur Clive thought it not improbable that Ireland, and not Britain, as Caesar supposed, was the source of Gaulish Druidism. Anglesey, says he, would be the most natural site for the British Druidical College. This suspicion once raised the parallel case of St. Columb Kill, accompanying Iona with his Irish monks and priests when he went upon his missionary expedition to the Picts, occurs to the mind. Assuredly, Iona was a sacred place of the Druids, and hence the likeness of the Chaldees to the other older tenants of the isle. Clive believed the civilization of Ireland was not due to the Celt, but to the darker race before them. In Druidism, he saw little of a Celtic character, and that all of what was noble and good contained in the institution was in some way derived from southern and Euskarian sources. May not the same be said of Wales? There, the true Welsh. Those of the south and southeast are certainly not the light Celt, but the dark Iberian, like to the darker Bretons and northern Spaniards. Martin, who wrote his Western Islands in 1703, tells us that in his day every great family of the Western Islands kept a Druid priest, whose duty it was to foretell future events and decide all causes, civil and ecclesiastical. Dr. Wise says, in the books of Deer we meet with Matadan, the Brehon, as a witness in a particular case. The laws found in the legal code of the Irish people were administered by these Brehons. They were hereditary judges of the tribes and had certain lands which were attached to the office. The successors of this important class are the sheriffs of the counties. The learned John Toland, born in Londonderry 1670, who was a genuine patriot in his day, believed in his country's Druids. In the Hebrides also he found harpers by profession and evidence of ancient Greek visitants. In Dublin he observed the confidence in augury by ravens. He contended that when the ancients spoke of Britain as Druidical, they included Ireland, for Ptolemy knew Erin as Little Britain. Erin as Little Britain. He recognized Druids, houses still standing, and the heathen practices remaining in his country. In Ireland, said he of the Druids, they had the privilege of wearing 6 colours in their brechans or robes, which are the striped brechi of the Gauls, still worn by the Highlanders, whereas the king and queen might have in theirs but 7, lords and ladies 5, etc. He had no doubts of their sun worship, and of Abaris, the Druid friend of Pythagoras, being from his own quarters. While he thought the Greeks borrowed from the northern Druids, he admitted that both may have learned from older Egyptians. Rhys, a wise and prudent man, is not willing to abandon the Druids because of the absurd and most positive announcements of enthusiastic advocates, since he says, I, for one, am quite prepared to believe in Druidic residue, after you have stripped all that is medieval and biblical from the poems of Taliesin. The same with Merlin, and others will echo that sentiment in relation to Irish Druidism, notwithstanding the wild assumptions of some writers and the cynical unbelief of others. After all eliminations, there's still a substantial residue. So what they're saying here is, even when you take away all the myths and the legends, there's still evidence there were Druids kicking around. One may learn a lesson from the story told of Tom Moore when first shown Old Irish MSS. I'm not sure what this MSS stuff is. I'll need to find out what that means. He was much loved and exclaimed, these could not have been written by fools. I never knew anything about them before, and I had no right to have undertaken the history of Ireland. An old Pirish poem runs, 7 years you're right, under a flagstone in a quagmire, without food, without taste, and the thirst you ever torturing. The law of the judges your lesson, and prayer your language. And if you like to return, you will be for a time a Druid, perhaps. Druid houses. This is interesting. Druid houses. This is maybe where the first churches came from, guys. Druid houses. Druid houses like those of St Kilda. I've never heard of Druid houses, to be honest with you. I'm going to have a wee look in the chat. Before I start this, I'm going to have a wee look in the chat. Oh, nice to see Tara Payne in the house. How you doing, Tara? The Tootha de Danann. Yep, we're mentioning them. Dee's mentioned how the flatties are going to love this stuff. Yep. And Dagon, how you doing, man? Oh, well, see you later. But anyway, I'll get back to the reading. Good to see you all. Sometimes I need just a wee rest for the staring at the screen, like every now and again, just refresh my eyes. So Dave Murphy would jump on that, the darker race thing. Oh God, aye. But when they say the darker race, I think they mean hair and eyes. I don't think they mean skin color. When they say darker race, they just mean like more Mediterranean. Black hair or dark eyes. Darker skin tone as well. But when they say dark, they don't mean black or maybe brown, maybe more on the brown side. But it's funny because all the years, and you'll know this, Dee, yourself, being in the flat earth, being involved within the flat earth, that all the years being involved in the flat earth, I've never heard of this Irish version of flat earth. And it's almost like the flat earthers have stolen it straight out of this Irish literature, this Irish legend. The firmament, the winds, that, oh my God, they have just the flat earthers have just plagiarized Irish mythology. That's all they've done. And not once did they even credit Irish mythology. It was always the Bible. It was always the Bible had the firmament. But it's funny how the Druids probably believed in all this, the zodiac and the firmament and that's crazy. Right, back to the reading. How long have I been reading for? An hour and 22 minutes. Oh, geez. Time flies when you're having fun, eh? But this is going to be interesting. Druid houses. This is another thing, guys. I've never heard of Druid houses. So I'm glad I'm reading these books because these little things come up that I can research further. These little notes, Druid houses, and other things earlier that we read about that I've never heard about. I'll go back and look further into those things. See these adverts, man. Right, Druid houses like those of St Kilda, Barrera Isle, etc., have become in modern day oratories of Christian hermits. They are arched, conical stone structures with a hole at the top for smoke escape. And this reminds me of Arthur's Owen. And it was in the Stenhouse. And there's a place in Scotland called Stenhouse Muir. And Stenhouse comes from stone house, a stone house. And they try and link this stone house with Arthur, King Arthur. They call it Arthur's oven. But they knocked it down in like the 16th century, in the 1700s. Or is that the 18th century? The 18th century, they knocked it down. It was like in the mid 1700s sometime. They knocked this big stone oven down, this big stone building. And it was similar to that. It sounded like a beehive shape. It was a beehive shape with possibly a hole at the top. But Arthur's Owen. Check that out, guys. Arthur's Owen. And it's near Stenhouse Muir. And there's a place called Camellan, where Arthur was meant to have been killed. There's lots of the Arthurian stuff over towards Falkirk, by the way. Anyway, sorry, I get on these weird tangents. Tolan calls them little arched round stone buildings, capable of only holding one person. They were known as Ticht nan Drudnek. There is generally in many no cement. And this is what they mentioned about this one at Stenhouse. It was like ashlar. They thought it was maybe Roman because it'd been there so long. That's crazy. With no cement. The so-called oratory of St. Kevin, 23 feet by 10 and 16 high, has its door to the west. It's funny because I went to the old silver mine and there was a place there that there was like a stick one. It was meant to be something to do with Druids. The writer was supported by the guide at Glendalough in the opinion of the great antiquity of St. Kevin's kitchen. The house at Dundalk is still a place of pilgrimage. See, I'll need to check that out, this house at Dundalk. The one at Gallerus, Kerry, has a semicircular window. Of these oratories, so-called, Wise observes, they were not Christian, but were erected in connection with this early, let us call it Celtic religion. If they had been Christian, they would have been at an altar and other Christian emblems, of which, however, they show no trace. If they had been Christian, they would have stood east and west and have openings in those directions. The walls always converged as they rose in height. That reminds me of Stobble and the old stone bit that was rebuilt on the end. And the Templar window, you remember that, people? Stobble and that Templar window, and it was facing, I think it was facing north, because you had the east, the west part of the church, and this little classroom was attached to, I think it was the north side of it. But I think Stobble actually faces more northeast. That's crazy. Sorry, guys, I'm just thinking. Right, connection with, let's call it Celtic religion. If they had been Christian, there was, right, openings in the direction. The walls always converged as they rose in height. So they always came together. It's interesting, this, actually. Because I might have to spot, because maybe there's like ducats, dovecots. Because dovecots remind me of these buildings as well. So these dovecot buildings, these small buildings. So this one, St. Kevin, is 23 feet by 10 and 16 feet high. So I wonder if a lot of these dovecots or ducats were turned into, well, they were maybe old Druidic houses, and maybe they've been turned into ducats. I'll need to look more into these Druid houses, actually, guys. That's really interesting. Oh, now we've got the Brehon Law. Irish Druids lived before the advent of socialism. They appear to have the education of the law, but as ecclesiastics, they delivered the offenders to the secular arm for punishment. Their holy lands were not to be defiled with blood. The law, known as the Brehon Law, then administered, was not socialistic. Irish law was by no means democratic, and was for that reason ever preferred to English law by the Norman and English chieftains going to Ireland. The old contest between the Irish and the Crown lay between those gentlemen rulers and their nominal sovereign. So, in ancient times, the Druids supported that law which favoured the rich at the expense of the poor. They were not socialists. Remember, this is 1894, people. So this is well before the rise of communism. They were, however, what we would call spiritualists, though that term may now embrace people of varied types. They could do no less wonderful things than those claimed to have been done by Mahatmas or modern mediums. They could see ghosts, if not raise them. They could listen to them and talk with them, though unable to take photos of spirits or utilize them for commercial intelligence. It would be interesting to know if these seers of Ireland regarded the ghosts with an imaginative or scientific eye? Could they have investigated the phenomena with a view to gain a solution of the mysteries around them? It is easy to call a druid a deceiver, as a politician a traitor, a scientist a charlatan, a saint a hypocrite. As the early days of Irish Christianity were by no means either cultured or philosophical, and almost all our knowledge of Druids comes from men who accepted what would now only excite our derision or pity, particularly indulging the miraculous, we are not likely to know what class of modern spiritualists we can assign the Druids of Erin. So, Irish literature. Our sources of knowledge concerning the Druids are from tradition and records. The first is dim, unreliable, and capable of varied interpretation. Of the last, Froude rightly remarks, confused and marvellous stories come down to us from the early periods of what is called history, but we look for the explanation of them in the mind or imagination of ignorant persons. The early records of all nations are full of portents and marvels, but we no longer believe those portents to have taken place in actual fact. Legends grew as nursery tales grow now. There is yet another source of information: the preservation of ancient symbols by the Church and by Freemasons. The scholar is well assured that both these parties, thus retaining the insignia of the past, are utterly ignorant of the original meaning or attach a significance of their own invention. Judging from Irish literature, most of which may date from the 12th century, though assuming to be the 8th or even the 5th, the Druids were, like the Tuatha, nothing better than spiritualistic conjurers dealing with bad spirits and always opposing the gospel. We need to be careful of such reports, originating as they did in the most superstitious era of Europe and reflecting the ideas of the period. It was easy to credit Druids and Tuaths with miraculous powers when the Levites of Irish saints abounded with narratives of the most childish wonders and the most needless and senseless display of the miraculous. There's when the lives of the Irish saints abounded with narratives of the most childish wonders and the most needless and senseless display of the miraculous. The destruction of Druids through the invocation of heaven by the saints, though nominally in judgment for a league with the evil spirits, was not on a much higher plane than the powers for mischief exercised by the magicians. Such tales fittingly represented a period when demoniacal possession accounted for disease or vagaries of human action, and when faith in our Heavenly Father was weighed down by the cruel oppression of witchcraft. Still, in many credulous and inventive stories of the Middle Ages, may there not be read between the lines something which throws light upon the Druids. Traditional lore was, in that way, perpetuated. Popular notions were expressed in the haze of words. Lingering superstitions were preserved under the shield of another faith. Then again, omitting the common practice of rival controversialists destroying each other's manuscripts would not be copied with such glosses as would show the absurdities of the former creeds, or as warnings to converts against the revival of error. Moreover, as the philosophers in early Christian days of the East managed to import into the plain and simple teaching of Jesus a mass of their own symbolism and the esoteric learning, was it likely that a body of Druids, having secrets of their own, should, upon the real or assumed reception of Christianity, import some of their own opinions and practices, adapted to the promulgation of the newer faith? No one can doubt that Druids, to retain their influence in the tribe, would be among the first and most influential of converts, and history confirms that fact. As a more intelligent and reverence from habit, with skill in divination and heraldic lore, they would command the respects of chiefs, while their training as orators or reciters would easily utilized by the stranger priests in the service of the church. But if, as is likely, the transition from Druidism to Christianity was gradual, possibly through the medium of Chaldeism, so that's what I'm saying, guys. I think that's the link between Christianity and Druidism is Chaldeism, and there might be another missing link between they two. But that's what I'm finding in my research. The intrusion of pagan ideas in the early religious literature can be more readily comprehended. As so much of all paganism was mixed up in the patristic works of Oriental Christendom, it cannot surprise one that a similar exhibition of the ancient heathenism should be observed in the West. O'Brien, in Round Towers, writes that church festivals themselves in our Christian calendar are but the direct transfers from the Tuath de Danann ritual. Their very names in Irish are identically the same as those by which they were distinguished by that earlier race, Gomes said. Druidism must be identified as a non-Aryan cult. So the church festivals themselves in our Christian calendar are by the direct transfers from the Tuath de Danann ritual. So there you go, guys. There's another connection between Christianity and the Celts, the earliest Christianity. Elsewhere, references made to the Chaldees. They were certainly more pronounced in Ireland and the part of Scotland contiguous to Ireland than either England or Wales. Ireland differs from its neighbours in the number of allusions to Druids in national stories. Tradition is much stronger in Ireland than in Wales, and often relates to Druids. On the other hand, it differs from that of its neighbours in the absence of allusions to King Arthur, the hero of England, Scotland, Wales, and Brittany. Rome, too, was strongly represented in Britain, north and south, but not in Ireland. It is not a little remarkable that the Irish Druids should seem ignorant, alike of round towers and stone circles. While so much have been written and believed concerning Druidism as associated with circles and cromlechs in Britain and Brittany, modern Druidism, whether of Christian or heathen colour, claims connection with Stonehenge, Avebury, and the stones of Brittany. Why should not the same claim be made for Irish Druids, earlier and better known than those of Wales? As megalithic remains in the shape of graves and circles are found all over Europe, Asia, and Northern Africa, why were Druids without association with these, from Japan to Gibraltar, and confined to the monuments of Britain? Why also in Ossian are the stones of power referred to the Norsemen only? In the Irish epic, the carrying off of the bull of Cualann, or Coaln, the Druid Cathbad is given a certain honourable precedence before the sovereign. That the Druids exercised the healing art is certain. Jubainville refers to a MS in the library of St. Gall, dating from the end of the 14th century. MS must mean manuscript. I don't know why they don't just put the word up. They put MS. I found this MS. It must be manuscript. Which has been on the back of it some incantations written by Irish seers of the 8th or 9th century. And one of them are these words: I admire the remedy which Dian Kecht left. Though a mysterious halo hangs about the Irish Druids, though they may have been long after the serpent worshippers, and even later than the Round Tower builders, tradition confidently asserts their existence in the island, but doubtless credits them with powers beyond those ever exercised. The love for a romantic past is not, however, confined to Ireland, and a lively imagination will often close the ear to reason in a cultured and philosophical age. St. Patrick and the Druids. Let us see what the biographers of St. Patrick have to relate about the Druids. A work published at St. Omer in 1625 by John Higham has this story. One day, as the saint said Mass in the said church, a sacrilegious magician, the child of perdition, stood without and, with a rod put in at the window, cast down the chalice and shed the holy sacrament. But God, without delay, severely punished so wicked a sacrilege, for the earth opened his mouth after a most strange manner, devoured the magician, who descended alive down to hell. So it sounds like a failed attempt by the magician to do something, and he ended up getting sucked up into a hole. A certain magician that was in high favour with the king, and whom the king honoured as a god, opposed himself against St. Patrick, even in the same kind that Simon Magus resisted the apostle, St. Peter, the miserable wretch being elevated in the air by the ministry of devils. The king and the people looked after him as if he were to scale the heavens, but the glorious saint, with the force of his fervent prayers, cast him down into the ground, where dashing his head against the hard flint, he rendered up his wicked soul as a prey to the infernal fiends. The tripartite life of St. Patrick relates. Lagar MacNeil possessed druids and enchanters who used to foretell through their druidism and through their paganism what was in the future for them. Coming to a certain town, the saint, according to history, found druids at a place who denied the virginity of Mary. Patrick blessed the ground, and it swallowed up the druids. The book of 1625 is the authority for another story. Two magicians with their magical charms overcast all the religion with a horrible darkness for the space of 3 days, hoping by that means to debar his entrance into the country. This is Patrick's entrance. Again, 9 magicians conspired the saint's death, and to have the more free access to him, they counterfeited themselves to be monks, putting on religious weeds. The saint, by divine information, knew that to be wolves wrapped in sheep's clothing, making, therefore, the sign of the cross against the children of Satan. Behold, fire descended from heaven and consumed them all 9. Because the same story, these wizards or these magicians getting sucked up into the ground. He is also reported to have caused the death of 12,000 idolaters at Tara. That sounds like a good guy, St. Patrick. St. Patrick contended with the Druids before King Lugair at Tara. One, Lochra, hardened the king's heart against the preaching, so the saint prayed that he might be lifted out and die, even as St. Peter had obtained the death of Simon Magus. In an instant, Lochra was raised up in the air and died, falling on a stone. So there's Lochra. And like I said, some of the history I've been reading about the myths of these Merlin, Myrddin, and Lake Locan. And it's like Loch. This name comes in, Logan. This Lochra had, it is said, previously foretold the saint's visit. A Telken, Baldhead, will come over the raging sea with his perforated garments, his crooked-headed staff, with his table, altar, at the east end of his house, and all the people will answer, Amen, Amen. The authorists of Ireland, the of the Chaldees, ventured to write, when the apostles of Ireland went there, the people believed him, for he taught no new doctrine. She thought Druidism, not very unlike Christianity. Dr. O'Donovan, upon the Four Masters, observes, nothing is clearer than that Patrick engrafted Christianity on the pagan superstitions with so much skill that he won the people over to the Christian religion before they understood the exact difference between the two systems of belief. And much of this half-pagan, half-Christian religion will be found, not only in the Irish stories of the Middle Ages, but in the superstitions of the peasantries of the present day. Todd sees that worldly wisdom is dedicating to a saint the pillar stone or sacred fountain. It is not necessary to discuss the question as to the individual saint himself, around which so much controversy has raged. They who read theology between the lines of old Irish history may be induced to doubt whether such a person ever existed, or if he were but a Druid himself, such being the obscurity of old literature. Saint Bridget's early career was associated with Druids. A miracle she wrought in the production of butter caused her Druidical master to become a Christian. Colgan contended that St. Patrick, by continually warring with Druids, exposed his body to 1,000 kinds of deaths. In the Guardsman's Cry of St. Patrick, which declares, Patrick made this hymn, we are informed that it was against incantations of false prophets, against black laws of hereticians, against surroundings of idolism, against spells of women, and of smiths and of Druids. The Annals of the Kingdom of Ireland, by the Four Masters, mentions a number of stories relative to the Irish Druids, then believed to have once ruled Erin. St. Patrick was a youthful slave to Milko, a Druidical priest. So here it's saying that St. Patrick was a slave to a Druid, or Druidical priest. Gradwell's Sucket therefore says, he must often have practiced heathenism rites in the presence of his household, and thus excited the horror of his Christian slave. So now we're on to the Scoto-Irish Druids. And I think I'll make this my last page, guys, since, do you know what? It's 10 to 2, so I'll just go for another 10 minutes. Right. We've got the Scoto-Irish Druids. St. Columba, the Chaldee, was much the same as St. Patrick in his mission work and his contests with Druids. He changed water into wine, stilled a storm, purified wells, brought down rain, changed winds, drove the devil out of a milk pail, and raised the dead to life. All that tradition, acknowledged as miraculous in the Druids, was attributed equally to Columba as to Patrick. Adamnan of Iona tells some strange stories of his master. One tale concerns Brocan, the Druid. On a certain day, Brocan, while conversing with the saint, said to him, tell me, Columba, when do you propose to set sail? To which the saint replied, I intend to begin my voyage after 3 days, if God permits me and preserves my life. Brocan then said, You will not be able, for I will make the winds unfavourable to your voyage, and I will create a great darkness over the sea. The wind rose and the darkness came, but the saint put off, and the vessel ran against the wind with extraordinary speed, to the wonder of the large crowd. The saint wanted the Druid to release an Irish female captive, which he declined to do, but says Adamnan, an angel sent from heaven, striking him severely, has broken in pieces the glass cup which he held in his hand, from which he was in the act of drinking, and he himself is left half dead. Then he consented to free the Irish girl, and Columba cured him of the wound. Opinions on Irish Druids. Leflock wrote his Etudes de mythologie celtique in 1869, observing, "Some represented the Druids as the successors of the Hebrew patriarchs, the masters of Greek philosophy, the forerunners of Christian teaching. They have credited them with the honors of a religious system founded upon primitive monotheism and crowned by a spiritualism more elevated than that of Plato and St. Augustine. One might perceive little of this in Irish tales, like the preceding. Leftlock is justified in adding, one will be at first confounded by the extreme disproportion which exists between the rare documents left by the past and the large developments presented by modern historians. Pliny speaks thus of the Druids. A man would think the Persian learned all their magic from them, and Pomponius Mela affirmed, they profess to have knowledge of the motions of the heavens and the Right, guys, I don't know what happened there, but I'm not sure how long I've been out for. I must have been out for about 10 minutes there. I don't know what happened there, guys. The StreamYard just went out. Look at my eye. Look what I've done to my eye the other day, guys. Look at that. I smacked myself in the face with a hammer. Can you believe that? I was up. I was fixed. I was repairing a big storage container because in my job we use storage containers. I was up on a ladder and I was pulling a clip, this big metal clip, whack right in the face with a hammer. So aye, brilliant, eh? Anyway, guys, I'll just end the broadcast now and I'll look back and see where it cut off and I'll just continue the reading for there. So if you're still there, people, cheers, and I'll see you in my next reading. Ta.